everybody online and here live with us. Thank you for joining us for this panel, Open Banking and Payments. I have the pleasure to have with me 6 amazingly knowledgeable people in open banking. I will introduce briefly each person, and we will move to our discussion, which will be structured in, let's say, 3 parts. First, we will take look at the status of open banking in the markets we are familiar with. Then we will discuss about the features which we consider interesting or challenging. And then we will discuss about where open banking and open finance go in our view. So I will start with my colleagues here on my right and on my left, and then I will move to my colleagues online. So we have here Cosmin Cosma, CEO of Finquare, an open banking-focused European fintech. Finquare partners with Banca Transilvania, Czech Bank, OTP Bank, Alpha Bank, and has as investors Elevator Ventures and Gapminder. Cosmin is a president of the board of the Romanian Fintech Association. Then I have also to my right Cristi Barbu, who is a founder and managing partner of IT Smart System, a company with 20 years experience in digital transformation projects for large enterprises. IT Smart Systems worked on open banking for the past 3 years and is a technology partner of Smart Fintech, the only licensed TPP in Romania for now. We hope that there will be more. On my left, I have Vladimir Pântea, who is the head of Open Banking Gateway, part of founding team of Soltege. Soltege is a company I came across probably 6 years ago when I was at Lloyd's, and Soltege just started, so it's a pleasure to have you here with me. Then I have here to my left Peter Ryan, a senior product manager with Infosys Finacle, part of a team with responsibility for open banking, payments, and data. He's based in the UK, but has spent a lot of his career working throughout Europe. Online, we have Ralph Olhausen, the founder of PayPractice, advising payment service providers, and notably PPRO and Tink, with a focus on PSD2 and open banking opportunities. Ralph is a member of multi-stakeholder groups in the area of PSD2, and I will just mention he is a chair of European Third-Party Providers Association, co-chair of the Berlin Group Open Finance Advisory Board, and alternate member of ECB Euro Retail Payment Board. I'm Andra Sonea, and I will be, sorry, how could I forget? Radu. We have online Radu Popa, who is a CTO, leading tech and product strategy at LuxHub. LuxHub operates in open finance in the European space. I will be the moderator for this session. It's a great honor for me, and I hope I can keep the pace with my colleagues here. I'm a research fellow at the University of Oxford, and I do research in financial infrastructure. My professional background is solution architecture for banks, and I have spent my career in London building systems for banks and working with startups. More recently, I was a head of solution architecture of FintechOS. So I will start our discussion just by making a few comments about what open banking is, even if probably most of you know, but it happens that I always hear different opinions. People think it's something else, it's something more, it's something less. And if we look globally, as open banking takes hold in various geographies, we really see that it means different things in different geographies. What I look at usually is what drives the open banking initiatives, if it's market-driven, like in the US or Australia or Brazil, or if it's regulatory-driven, like in Europe or in the UK. I also look who is included, who has a right to play in this space. So in Europe, we have the TPPs. In Brazil, for example, they are just the financial institutions for now. No special licensing regime for other small financial institutions or startups. I would also look, when I look globally, what you can do under open banking. So if we look at Europe and PSD2, it started strictly with two things. One is payment initiation from current accounts or payment accounts, and the second one is account information from payment accounts, again, which typically are the current accounts. If we look what others want to do, like we look at Canada, for example, they don't want to include payment initiation, but they want to include account information from more financial products. So I would say that it's worth paying attention of what open banking is, what you can do with it, and who is allowed to play in this game. What enhances the ecosystem and what limits the ecosystem. So I will start this discussion by asking each of my colleagues here in the panel about the status of open banking, and I will start here with Kristi.
Hello, everybody. Yes, I would share my closer. Okay, is this okay? Okay. When it comes to the APIs exposed by the banks for complying with the PSD2 regulation, usually the TPPs are complaining about lack of some functionalities, about missing or poor customer experience, reliability, availability, or performance of the APIs. However, quite often, TPPs overlook a very important aspect of the development of solutions based on PSD2 APIs, which is the proper API lifecycle management processes, right? Because besides all the aspects that I've mentioned earlier, we are relying in our development heavily on having proper lifecycle management of the APIs. And I would mention here, for example, Sandbox. Yeah? It's a regulatory requirement for the banks to provide a sandbox. But the sandbox has to be relevant, has to be as close as possible to the production environment. Otherwise, it doesn't really help. Yeah? I'm talking about here API versioning. Yeah? I'm talking about communication processes of the changes that banks are making on their APIs. The regulatory requirement is that they inform the TPPs about changes, the planned changes, with sometimes I think 6 weeks or something like that. Before they are really making the change, they publish the change before moving to production and so on. To be honest, I don't see this on the sandboxes or on the production environments of the banks here in Romania, which really creates hurdles in front of us and in our development process. So I think this is an important aspect for the banks to look at and improve. And also for the central bank to monitor closer and make sure things are also followed properly in this respect. Yeah.
Yeah. So, if we are speaking about Romania, let's speak a bit on a very practical use case, because I don't want to complain about the banks. Right now, the APIs started to work. There are thousands and the tens of thousands of users that are using right now open banking in Romania. And this is, okay, it's small if you are looking at the whole digital market, but it's still something that started. There were the banks that started this game. It was Banca Transilvania, it was Czech Bank, and it was BCR that started to create multi-banking use case in their digital channels. And you know, the things are started to go. The main point is here that the regulatory standpoint is not using the opportunity to move faster. Because we have only one TPP, yeah, that took the chance and get outside of the bureaucracy hurdles in order to take the license. And there is still not very tough regulatory controls and monitoring of the APIs. Right now, there is the base, there is usage. There are thousands, we have millions of entries in our Finquer infrastructure because we are powering up the biggest bank in Romania for these open banking use cases. And there is usage, there is a live interaction with these APIs. Right now, it is the time for the National Bank of Romania to take a stand and to make it happen more and more easily. And then the things like they need to tell us if they do any modification, because they need to tell us, it's a regulatory thing, not to change the wires and then we have a surprise that the API is not working because they changed the wires. This is something that, in the end, it's also a regulatory duty, in fact. And we already have on the payment initiation also, we will speak later on this. There is payment initiation in Romania. There is open banking working in Romania. We are doing a payment initiation. There are even passported players that are doing payment initiation. It is working, okay, small, easily, but open banking is coming. It's just a matter of let's do it. We need to go faster with the actions.
Yes, I would somehow support this statement around the fact that open banking is here, and that's a fact. We at SaltEdge basically do a one-year review of all of the progress that happened in this space. And each year we're publishing a report. So this September or end of August, we've published our latest report around the payment initiation services. And what we found is the fact that indeed open banking is here. Indeed, open banking is already part of our everyday life. It is, of course, very unfortunate that here in Romania it's still at that initial stage of ramping up. But the fact is that all of the players are in place. So we do have technical service providers, we do have banks here, and we do have use cases that we can support. What our colleagues mentioned around the sandbox is indeed less than half of the sandboxes do provide relevant data, do provide relevant flows. You cannot do a great quality product if you cannot basically test it or validate it in production. The other thing is the payment initiation flows. Yes, they are there, but basically the user experience is far away from the other payment methods that are present on the market. And that's what we need to change. So previously we were listening to our keynote speaker around the request to pay, around the possibility to basically streamline the payment experience at points of interest and so on. The issue here is that basically the regulators and the market should outline those experiences, should basically make them possible. And in order to do that, we cannot ignore the fact that there should be players on the market. There should be a technology put in place in the market. And similarly how Andra commented about UK, as they've been basically working their hard to make it possible to go away from the legacy payment methods and build the road to the open finance. So hopefully we'll get there. And not only in Europe, but also here in Romania, because we have all the means to do that.
It's conversations like this, I suddenly feel very old. I've been working with open banking for 5, 6 years now. And to me, it's business as usual. I can, in the UK, I can pay my taxes, but with open banking, I can, go shopping with open banking, or the payment rails are there, they're instant. When my son wanted to rent a flat, he's a student. The credit check was done through open banking. It was open finance. It's just business as usual, and that's how Infosys look at it as well. The problems you mentioned with the sandboxes, they are a real problem. And if banks are going to survive in an open banking world, they need to take these things seriously. So that's why we have a product, a API Connect product. It doesn't just supply the APIs; it supplies the sandbox. If you want an API gateway as part of that, we can supply that. We can just plug it all in and give you composable banking as a service. So, to me, open banking is business as usual. It's not new. It's what we should do day to day. And it's the things beyond that, the use cases that we should start concentrating on. So that's my introduction.
Radu, can you please comment what your view, and then we let Ralph summarize, because I think as a chair of the TPP Association, he has a view over Europe that might complement what we have heard so far.
Sure. Well, first of all, nice to meet everybody, and I'm sorry I wasn't able to participate directly in the conference, but you know how it is with the pandemic situation. Now, to the topic. So in Luxa, basically what we did, we started as a technical service provider for banks, and then quite recently we obtained our TPP license as well. So we've seen a little bit of both sides, right? And I completely agree with what was said already about the current situation. I think, yeah, open banking is moving. Obviously, it's going somewhere. It's on the way, but it's still very much in its infancy. We've seen, like we said, the problems with the APIs themselves, with the sandboxing. Basically, testing something in sandbox, it's useless. The production APIs are completely different, and they react totally different. Data is different. The authorization flows are different. We recently connected quite a big group actually, and they still have a sandbox, or you have a hard-coded token that you are just supposed to use for all your calls, right? So this is actually directly from the bottom of the things. Then the regulatory landscape is also not so great. I think with PSD2 especially, it was a big mistake that the EBA didn't propose also a clear API to be followed. I think what they did in Open Banking UK, not only from the API point of view, but also from the access control point of view, it was a lot better, going for standard and let's call them battle-tested flow for authorization, and not reinventing the wheel. And that had a lot of influence of what we see now, right? We are still lagging a lot behind in Europe. We've seen other countries catching up, like you mentioned Brazil, but Australia is doing quite well, and the amount of data that they're going to eventually expose via these APIs, it's a lot more than account information and payment initiation. So, yeah, there are still a lot of things to do. The things are moving, but we are not there yet. And we are not there yet, considering PSD2, 3 years after we were supposed to be, basically. So I'm not overly optimistic, but I hope things will move into the right direction.
Ralph?
Olaf.
Yeah, hello. Well, thanks for having me here. I'm glad to join, albeit only remotely. Well, let me start with saying that I may sound even older than Peter here, because me personally, I'm involved in open banking now 15 years. I come from Germany, where this has been business as usual for a very long time. There are other countries in Europe where open banking has also started well before PSD2s. But what is different now is that we have a regulation, and this has pros and cons. On the positive side, it means that all countries in Europe are now into this open banking. And on the say more difficult side is that we have some, let's say, teething problems with getting used to some of the stipulations around this regulation PSD2 and the RTS in particular. So with these new regulation being now really live since September 19, and I think as was mentioned earlier, it's actually in sandboxes even a half year longer, which then turned out to be not quite exactly what the production APIs are or should have been. And ever since, though, for the last 2 years, we have seen progress, but it is indeed going slow. So we have in particular, I'm afraid we are facing obstacles, and having discussed this for quite some time, they're very eventually, or some of them eventually recognized by the regulator EBA with a new opinion, well, an opinion in 2020, which was looking in particular into, well, the main obstacles like the 90 days reauth, mandatory redirections, multiple SCAs, account selection processes, additional checks by banks on the consent, the need for unnecessary registrations of TPPs and such. So we were hoping that this would then change and these would be removed. The expectation was end of last year, hasn't happened. So the EBA came out with an enforcement opinion this year in February about making sure that banks will actually remove those obstacles. And now, well, as far as I know, most of the regulators have set as a deadline for the end of this year. So I'm really hopeful for the start of next year to see APIs which have most of these obstacles removed.
I will continue with our guest online to reverse the order, and I would like to hear from you, Rolf. What are the features in the open banking ecosystem that you keep an eye on and you want to see them succeeding? What are the challenges? Why are you focusing on that particular feature?
Well, for this question here around use cases, I wanted to focus on one, I think, huge opportunity which third-party providers did not have really so far. And so, as I said, so many of them have been in business for a decade or longer, and in particular for payment initiation, this has been very much focused or limited really to the e-commerce use. And now with the evolution as we have it, in particular towards instant payments, there is a huge opportunity to move this beyond e-commerce into retail, in-store commerce at the point of sales. And we have just spent, well, many years in implementing all this infrastructure, which has led to an enormous reach, much more than cards or any of the wallets. We have basically enabled people to make payments from their bank account directly. So anyone having a bank account and without anything in addition, no card, no wallet, no app, no whatever, could now make a payment straight from the account. And in order to enable that in a store, of course, it does need some additional things which we're only here now experiencing and trying to implement. But from a merchant's perspective, online or offline in store, the number one thing is reach. And the number two thing is conversion. And the number three thing is the cost of it. And as I just said, within the reach, I think next to cash, online banking payments or PISP payment initiation has by far largest reach. So it's about 400 million people in Europe that can be reached with that. But in order to get that immediate payment certainty that you need in a shop, we have to make these payments not based on normal credit transfers, but it has to be instant credit transfers. So it's that adoption of instant credit transfers which is really important. And in terms of conversion, making it work easily, so we need, of course, no friction, strong customer authentication. That, I think, is probably the biggest obstacle. We need very low friction there. And so indirectly, therefore, coming back to the removal of the obstacles I mentioned before. And on the cost side, for merchants, I think there is also an opportunity to save and then to pass on these savings to the customers, because these payments, payment initiation has, as far as experience has shown so far, had a much better cost base, lower cost to the merchant, to everyone really. But that means that here for instant payments, we'll have to not only get it mandated across the whole of Europe, but it also cannot really carry any premium cost, because otherwise people wouldn't use it for payments.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ralph. That's an incredible, that's an amazing topic to discuss, and I would like to discuss this for another hour. Probably it would not be enough. I will refrain from asking questions. I have probably 10 questions to ask you after this explanation, but because of the short duration of our talk, I will keep the questions for the end. Radu, could you please tell us what LuxHub does and what are you most excited about in the open banking space?
Right, so it relates a little bit to the point that I made before, the fact that we are still in infancy of open banking, but we've seen also a lot of the services, the standard services, let's say the account information, the payment initiation, that are becoming to be much more present. And we've seen almost this moving towards a commodity status. So basically, everybody is offering this kind of services, right? Any TPP that is there, they will have basic account information, payment initiation in the framework of PSD2, Open Banking UK, or whatever else. We've seen examples where this account information, at least, right, is offered for free. So there is no money really to make in that direction for the basic product. So there are additional, I would say, the second generation of products that we can build on that, like transaction categorization and this kind of basic data analytics that we can put on top of the services that also, in my view, they are heading the same direction to be commodities. So you'll be able only to compete based on the price that you can offer on that, right? So from my point of view, this will eventually end up like being just the rails, the infrastructure of the open banking. And what we need to concentrate upon and what we do in LuxHub is basically concentrate on building products that are value addition on top of these rails. As an example, I'll give what we call premium APIs. Basically, these are APIs that are offered by financial institutions next or based on the infrastructure that is given by the PSD2 APIs. Talking, for example, for payment instruments of making use of the ACA exemptions that we have in the RTS, right? So building on top of that. There are similar initiatives for account information where a particular corporation would like direct access to its own account and transaction history. So we can do that without necessarily putting SCA in place, simplify the access and so on and so forth. And then there is one last area that I would like to mention, and you had the starting speak here at the Banking for Zero conference by Daniel Goldschneider about the GAIN initiative. I think this is totally a very important topic for banks that they should grab the opportunity to go into. The digital identity, it is an area that connects connects to open banking or open finance, I would say, but in the same time, it can be a great stream of revenue, and in the same time, it will ensure participation in building this infrastructure of open finance.
So looking at payment initiation and open banking, it works best when there's a number of things that all work together. As Ralph mentioned with payment, instant payments, the ability to initiate a payment and then have it settle, with value within 10 seconds. That makes open banking a lot easier. Now, looking at, we have to start looking at open banking not just from a bank's point of view or a sort of fintech point of view, but as a sort of wider economy. Now, open banking, direct instant payments are cheaper than card payments. That's better for the economy. That's better for the merchants. Now, if we start putting all the different pieces together, like a request to pay, initiating a payment initiation, which creates an instant payment, that sort of journey makes life so much easier for merchants. It saves them money. It helps the economy. They don't have the 2-3 day wait for a card payment to settle. So we need to start thinking not just in terms of where open banking sits and how it affects banks and what are the opportunities for a fintech, but what are the wider economic values. Because banks are there to serve their economies. And when you lose sight of that, that's when customers become, when you start losing value for the customers. And then that's when you can be disintermediated. So that's, when we start thinking about open banking, about payment initiation, it's part of a wider economy that we need to start thinking about these things, and not just thinking from our perspective, but also thinking of the perspective of the customers and the merchants. And I think that's when we start thinking that way, that's when open banking, particularly payment initiation, will start deriving real value for our economies.
Yes, great comments from our colleagues. I would mention the fact that I would refer a bit to history, and in that terms, in order to make anything work, it should have been first validated by the business. So basically, all of the means of technology, all of the means of progress that we have in the recent years have been validated first in the business space. So I would say in order to become part of the bigger economy, as Peter mentioned here, or to leverage the SEPA instant payments, we first need to fix or to create real business use cases around that. So basically help all of the let's call them business-to-business transfers, enable them on top of the SEPA Instant, enable them by pay-by-link, e-invoicing, and so on. So without solving those issues and without addressing those experiences, we won't be able to provide the same level or even better level of experience to the end customers. So the things that I'm most interested right now in terms of the open banking, of course, are the request to pays, are the SEPA Instant, all of those pieces of the puzzle that will help us build the great experiences, but also the initiatives around variable recurrent payments. So this is something very new to the market, which would allow, based on the consent from the end customer or from the business, to basically pool money from his account. So it's very similar to the existing solutions of direct debit, but on top of that, we've added the factor of variability of the amount, some rules based, so when you can do it. So you can withdraw the last Friday of the month because you basically know that the last Thursday of the month you get the salary and so on. And of course, everything will be done with the consent from the end customer. So nothing is possible without the consent of the end customer. So everything that we right now build in open banking should be consented by the customer. And this is the most interesting part because we take control from the financial institutions, we take control from the, let's call those businesses, merchants, and so on, and we put that granular control into the hands of the end customers. This is very interesting because this shifts the mind of all of the players on the market. It allows to build decentralized processes. And this is very important right now to enable payments not only in open banking in Europe, but all over the world. So we saw similar initiatives in Brazil, in Middle East, and Australia is catching up very fast. So hopefully during next years we'll see a lot more initiatives as open banking or already solutions as open finance all over the world.
Just 1 second, I have a question. Indeed, it's a topic of great interest in London, in particular, about variable recurring payment, and the 9 CMA banks will have to comply and provide this service. However, while it sounds good that you give a consent for a payment which is recurring and it's variable in the amount. There is a discussion around how this functionality could be abused and how the consumer is protected, because it looks like a direct debit, but it doesn't have the protection that the direct debit for the consumer that the direct debit has, it's a line which is very difficult to navigate. So on one side, because I'm mainly digital and I know, I identify the features, I like to try them and so on, but I'm also very much aware that there is a vast, gap in knowledge when people look at payments to differentiate what am I consenting here to? What type of payment is this? And what are my rights in relationship to this? Have you seen different discussions in the world around this type of consent? Or what do you think is the best practice from what you have seen?
So the idea around the controls, or let's call them what we can put, how we can safeguard the end customer of any abuse or fraud and so on, are basically around the consent controls. So what regulation says, it says about the fact that in order for you to collect that consent, you need to be very clear about what you will be do with that. And you need to put the controls like maximum amount, total amount per transaction, the number of transactions that will be executed based on this consent, and so on and so forth. And let's not forget, because this will be just the message of the payment initiation. So you will have the consent, the controls part, which will be stored on the end of TPP and the bank which you are banking with. And the second part is the actual payment message initiation. So what you will do is that you will say, hey, I would like to withdraw that amount of money. But you cannot do it without verifying the controls you're first, and then the bank will verify the controls that you have associated with that consent. And in that terms, you will never be able to withdraw more than it was initially consented. And the second part of it is that the end customer has the full control over the process. So the end customer will see all of those granted consents exactly the same how you see all of your subscriptions right now, either on your bank side or in some application that aggregated it for you. And you are able to always withdraw that or revoke that consent based on the APIs that currently are put in place. And this is something which basically will make sure that anyone on the market who is into payments, who is into subscriptions, who is into any type of online services, digital services, big tech companies will come to play with those VRPs in very recent years. So let's look forward for that.
Thank you.
Yes. So I will have my thoughts on this, and I like very much, Olaf, that you mentioned some real use case on the payment initiation at the POS in offline, which is something not tackled enough by the innovators in the open banking space. And you know, I remember we were with Radu and with Vladimir 3 years ago at the Banking 4.0, and we were speaking about the prehistory of open banking, and we are not quite optimistic at that point that it will come, this open banking. Right now, we are still in the prehistory of open banking, but what I can tell you, at Thinkware, we have another way of approaching this. I know that there are a lot of hurdles in the regulation, in the technical standards, but we believe that a blended approach, regulatory, together with the market-driven approach, is something that might have the best results. And what we did in the last 3 years after that talk was that we made it available for the banks to start open banking and use the APIs. What I can tell you, si tout va bien, so help guide us. Next year, you will see wholesalers doing payment initiation at the point of sales. We are exploring this with wholesalers because 2% business card processing, it's a big amount for a margin in the wholesaler space. And while the big wholesalers will start to make the first experiments with payment initiation at the POS, then the market will come with or without the clarity in the regulatory framework. So this is something that you'll see next year, and at Thinkware we are doing this promise to make it happen, at least at the experimental stage, with or without instant payments, you will see. And you also will see big enterprises. We already have 20 enterprises, big companies in Romania starting to experiment with open banking in their ERPs, in doing accounts reconciliation and connecting their systems to the banks through us with Thinkware. And we believe that this will make a lot of space for improvements in open banking. That's our promise.
Yeah, for us at IT Smart Systems and Smart FinTech, besides enhancing continuously our existing products, we have a strategic interest in request for payment and in open data. Specifically, when it comes to open data, we are looking at identity information sharing. We have joined the GAIN initiatives. I hope some of you were here yesterday for the presentation of Daniel Goldschreiber regarding GAIN, Global Assured Identity Network, which is a new initiative, and I think it's very promising in terms of relying on identity information made available for trusted identity providers. We have joined this initiative. One of my colleagues participated in white paper, GAIN white paper writing. So, and we will continue to stay close to them, and hopefully we will convince soon identity providers from Romania, namely banks, who are right now, I think, the most trusted identity providers here. We will convince them to open up in this direction and support the initiatives. It's picking up in United States, in Europe, so hopefully it will pick up here in Romania as well. We want to support this and be part of it when it picks up here in Romania also. Secondly, we are looking very closely to request to pay features. Our partners at Smart FinTech already enhanced their product, and will launch in January this feature in Smart Pay, the payment initiation service that they are offering. However, the current implementation they have, it's a custom one based on our own solution, technical solution, and we look closely to evolving schemes like the one that Etienne described in the beginning of today, because we want to adhere to such schemes, and in order to be able to scale, in order to be able to connect to as many touch points as possible. So we are looking closely to this, as we feel this will happen soon. Definitely payment initiation at the point of interaction, PIS at POI, it's definitely of interest for us. We are not that confident as Cosmin here that this will happen so soon. of course,
we are working on it.
We are working on it.
Right now,
okay.
as we speak.
So we hope this will also pick up and will help, as Vladimir said, in adopting the open banking solution. Thank you.
So we are moving in the last part of the discussion, which is about the future state of open banking, what we think will happen. I would like just to add some comments about what I see in this space, or what I find interesting. I monitor for a while what type of business models are being created based on these new licenses. So I'm interested how it works. So I'm interested in Soltage and and what they do and what they enable. But I'm also interested in what type of businesses are being enabled. And I find fascinating that despite the fact that, for example, in Europe, we started from the same regulation, PSD2. We saw different standards emerging. So we saw the UK OBIE standard. We saw the Berlin standard that Ralph probably can tell us more about. We saw a standard in France. We saw something in Poland. We saw also a mixture of everything in countries where no standard has been adopted, but standards are being brought through the main banks. This puts creates a big challenge for the startups, a challenge that companies like Soltage can solve, or Thinkware, or you. Also, what we clearly see is a very big difference in the number of TPPs in the country. So we have Germany, Netherlands, Sweden, France, we have the Baltics, which have a considerable number of TPPs compared to Romania, Bulgaria, Austria, Portugal, and so on. It's interesting what enables some and what restricts others. Also, we see very different models from country to country. So we see in some countries that credit decisioning, it's the thing, what people do with those transactions, what companies do with those transactions. And then on credit decisioning, you could have some niche type of lending in some cases. There is a lot of movement in streamlining banking and accounting in one go, targeting various categories of customers, either freelancers or individuals or bigger companies or even auditors. The PFM thing, which started a decade ago, has transformed so in various different ways. It moved into offering, loyalty, you name it. Even carbon counting. Yeah. So a different type of categorization. So it's a moving, changing landscape. And also what I find very interesting is that countries which are coming in the second wave, like Brazil, Canada, and Australia, really do take advantage of the lessons learned. They completely jump over the period when we were thinking about standards, and we spent years doing that. So they already had the standards for the APIs. They had the technology companies who have developed the APIs. And it's very interesting to watch, because the learning could go also the other way around. We look what they do when they move so fast, and maybe we can adopt what they do. So I will start again in a in a circle in the other direction. What do you think will happen, or what do you want to happen in open banking?
So in order to be very short, as like our last thoughts, I believe in open banking. I believe we need to do it. We are putting open banking at work, and then we will see the difficulties in regulatory and the talks with the politicians in European, because we really believe that open banking is creating a better financial world for all of us here in Romania and in Central and Eastern Europe. That's my thought. Cristi.
Yeah. For me, I'm thinking of one of the goals of PSD2, which was to democratize the financial services, which is not really happening right now. And I really look forward for this open banking features or benefits to be accessible, to be available to innovators that can really build on top of that. Yeah, not us technology companies, not the banks, but real innovators born for innovation, that to have access to open banking services and really innovate and change our day-to-day lives. Yeah.
So what we are mainly looking around is the fact that the adoption is there. So we are talking about open banking payments right now. So I would say being part of this movement already for like the last 10 years maybe, in just the last 3 to 5 months, we've processed shy of less than 1 million open banking initiation payments. And in that terms, I would say that the use cases that you've outlined, the models that are coming up on the market, they're already there. So we are already enabling them. It's just the matter of time how far they would be adopted. How many players on the market will feel like they already have access to open banking, they already are using it, and so on. And our colleagues Peter and Ralph can support me here that we are already doing it and it's working. It's the end customers, it's the businesses who already take advantage of that. What is basically coming up in future is basically globalization of this aspect. So the globalization of payments, of open finance and so on, because we see that all the countries, all the regions that you've mentioned, North America, South America, Australia, MENA and so on, those are all already jumping ahead in some aspects. Instead, yes, indeed, they've adopted all of the greatest standards that we've developed here. They've learned all of the lessons already. But it comes to them to build the infrastructure, to power up the use cases, and to basically have the regulatory framework. As my colleagues mentioned, it is very important. It is very important to not stop the innovation, to not retain it, but actually fueling it. And one of the basically changes that we clearly saw is that 2 years ago when the pandemic struck, it basically changed the whole perception of the open banking. So anyone became a player on open banking. Everyone wanted to tap into those technologies because there were no customers on site. There were no people coming into your stores, shops, and so on. There were people who were sitting home and wanted to use the services that you can provide. And suddenly, as Cosmin also mentioned, the merchants realized that paying 2% for each transaction is not scalable when they're also restricted on the resources. And in that case, open banking was at their hand. They just had to reach it out to find the right business partners to do that. So hopefully we'll, in the next couple of years, we'll see the true open finance, we'll see the true payments enabled everywhere. So online, at points of interest, for businesses, even for governments. So this is also a big topic here.
I'm positive about open banking. I'll give an example of how I see it moving forward and being, embedded in the lives based on a project we're working on. So a lot of, so if we take a business doing their banking, they send out an invoice. They can send it out through request to pay. That would initiate a payment initiation and the payment coming in. Because it's using open banking, it's saving the money that on the payment. But because all of that is automated, you can reconcile the invoices issued against the payments made. Similarly, invoices that you receive and that you need to pay, you can automate them. When they're received, pay within 30 days, pay within 45 days. So all of that can be automated, all of that can be reconciled. That takes a huge administrative burden off of your business customers. And from a bank's point of view, they can offer this as a service. And they can go further, because once you know the invoices that have been issued, the invoices that have been received, you can then build a cash flow. You can see where there's liquidity gaps, and then you can start working with your customers to offer them the finance they need. Now, that sort of journey, the journey of the future, only works with open banking, with payment rails, all of them integrated together. And I think that through the API technology is where we're going in the future.
Radu, your last thoughts?
Right. So indeed, I think we're starting to see a lot of traction in this area. We see more and more APIs coming back. We see more and more interesting applications of these APIs in innovative products. Here, I'm a lot more on the side of what Christy mentioned before, that I think is just the beginning, and the real innovators and real inventors will come and use what we have right now in a proper way. From this point of view, I differentiate from what Peter said about the request to pay and the payment initiation based on it and all that. For me, that is just another shoe on the same foot. I don't think this is exactly what will be the most benefit that we are bringing right now with this open finance, but the new innovative products that we didn't even foresee yet. We're in a bit of, if you want, the 2000 on the internet era, when we've seen companies like Google beginning to spread out with a completely new way of doing things, and we've seen giants like Yahoo beginning to fade. So I think this is where open finance is taking us, and how we'd like to play in this area right now in Luxab. One of the central initiatives that we are following is to provide the marketplace for both providers and consumers of services related to open finance. And when I'm saying services or products, I'm not strictly speaking about the APIs. We're talking about the application that can be built with these APIs. We're talking about the products that are a combination of APIs and more classical ways of moving data, like file transfer, for example. Basically providing a playground for all these players to come together and see what can be done with the multitude of tools that are available. I think this seems to be something that is missing. Everybody is concentrated very much on one side of the story, but putting it together and bringing fintechs and banks together in a trusted and secure environment, I think it is something that has potential to contribute in this move of open finance and bring forward more innovation in the area. So I would like also to extend the invitation, since we are talking in Romania, and I know there is a quite active fintech sector in the country. I would like to invite them to come in touch, come play on this playground that we want to provide. We have quite good relations, I would say, with a lot of financial institutions, not only in Europe, but quite recently we participated and were quite instrumental in development of open banking in Switzerland, by collaboration with SIX. So there are synergies that we for sure can develop based on such a common playground. And I think really this will be something that we would like to concentrate on, and from where a lot of initiative and innovation can come and bring value basically to this area of open finance, on which we are all participating.
Thank you. Ralph?
Yeah, I think going forward, one of the main things to realize is that we need more collaboration with the banks. We need more market-led initiatives, and well, some of the companies I work with, Tink, also Keypro, are working very closely with banks, as you may know. And I think this is where the future is. We cannot rely on regulation, and we cannot just rely on sort of free for all APIs. So here in Europe, we have a European-wide initiative started called the SEPA API Access scheme, which, by the way, yesterday was decided to actually go ahead. Now led by the EPC as a scheme manager. And this is, I think, the most promising way forward. Well, we do need a review of the regulation. We have to fix some of the problems which were there, which have been introduced. We have to review it. We have to learn from the lessons. We have to amend it. And there are things to be done, like, for example, the account access should not be the norm. It should be the exemption. You need SCA for moving money, but not for looking at it. There is a simple authentication enough. We have to look at mandatory redirections. We have to improve the payment certainty, not just by waiting and hoping for instant payments, but also allowing PISPs access to the account to judge the risk of payments initiated, then not being executed later on, which is a big problem, or would be a big problem if not treated. There is limitations like the 4 times a day access, which is, I think, a legacy from when this was meant to go through user interfaces. There is read-write access to the trusted beneficiary lists in order to maximize or use exemptions which currently can't be used by TPPs. But all of that is to get the basics, maybe the foundation improved. But what we need on top is a commercial approach. It is something like a scheme where you have banks on one side, third-party providers on the other, and where you can create services which can then really compete with the likes of cards or global wallets. So there you have to have a reliable ways of using or not using SCA, for example, using exemptions. And I think, there is a saying in English, you pay peanuts, you get monkeys. And going forward, we need much better improved APIs. There are API standard extensions, in particular by the Verling Group, as you already mentioned, others as well. So premium APIs is good, but from a TPP's perspective, we cannot have bilateral contracts with thousands of banks in Europe. So what we need is a scheme where each participant has one contract with the scheme. And that is what we're trying to achieve here with that SEPA API, now called SEPA Payment Account Access Scheme. And maybe a word on going beyond payments, because and also going beyond payment accounts, because open finance is an evolution. So we're here with open, we're calling it, many call it open banking, but it really is only open payments. Now going forward and including other accounts, savings accounts, card accounts, investment accounts, mortgage accounts, and all that is what we think open finance shall bring. And I have a real problem there with the use of the word sharing all the time, because I think one of the biggest holdups for us is that people are told that open banking or PSD2 is about sharing the data. It's not about sharing the data. It is about keeping that data very, very, very secure and only being handled by entities which now have to have a license for that, are supervised for that purpose, so that the 100% confidentiality of that data is secured. I'm not giving away control. What I'm doing is I'm unlocking my data. I'm getting the ability to use value-added services beyond what my own bank gives me, so that I can use my data at my bank in a better way. I'm not giving it away. So there is other developments like the financial data space and which is about sharing, which is about commercially sharing, is about supply chain management between companies, etc. That's where I commercialize, where I sell my data. But what we call open finance, and then also maybe open data, is not about sharing it. It's about giving access to it so that I can use it for myself and having better services for myself. So that's why I think we have to be very careful there in separating what we call open finance here from the commercialization of finance data in these data spaces. And of course, going forward, big things happening there, but also in, coming from other areas, there is the European identity wallets being now foreseen, which shall be very interesting, in particular, if they can be used for strong customer authentication, which is the plan. And so that will bring a huge step forward for lower friction SCA. And then, of course, digital euro bringing also huge opportunities for TPPs as well.
Thank you very much, Rolf. It seems that we have time for questions. So if anybody here in the room has questions, I would be very happy to address them. So until you decide. I could have some questions, and if any of you want to address this. This debate about sharing data or not sharing data, or what it means and so on, I think very often comes from cases which are sometimes misdirected, or they were not considered either by the regulator or somebody who has to take in consideration data protection. I'll give you an example. In London, for example, if you are a young person and you want to rent a flat, you go to a real estate agency and you say, I want to rent this flat. And normally you would have to provide a letter from your employer or somehow to prove that you can afford that flat. Now they tell you, you need to share the financial data with us. And the guys are like, no. And they are like, yeah, this is our process now. We want to, so of course, because we know the open data world, we know that, yes, if you look at somebody's transactions, you can extract the salary data or the revenue data, and you can use that and so on. Is a real estate agency a TPP? No, it's not. It's an agent. Do you expect, as a customer, that they ask you for this? Maybe not. Do you have another way of engaging with them? No, because they change the process. So I think this is where things become messy, and we, as players in the open banking world, should make it clearer and fairer and so on. So I'm sure, I mean, it's not that I'm sure. I know many other cases where things are a bit distorted. Any comments on that?
I will speak more about, this issue of sharing data. We are doing a lot of exploration and right now working in POCs with enterprises. And in this field of the enterprising is not about sharing data, it's about accessing their own data in a way in which they can do something with it. So the enterprises, because the companies, the businesses, it's not about privacy. It's about effectively using the data in a way in which they couldn't do it until these open banking opportunities. RPA, for example, cannot access, because of the strong customer authentication, cannot access the data from the banks. If you want to optimize your financial operations in an enterprise, you need to do this strong customer authentication to pull the data, or to use, like the pager, which were host-to-host connectivity solutions, like the pager in the world of mobile phones, to have that 1 time per day host-to-host connectivity. Right now, it's not about sharing. I'm totally agree with Ralph, and I liked very much the way in which Ralph did this synthesis of the issues with open banking right now. It's about having the access to the data in a very controlled, in a very very strict, regulated way, so that we can use the data and make value out of it, and make it information. Yeah, that's my point on sharing the data. And on the consumer side, it is the same. Each and every time when this data is shared, the consumer should be very conscious about. The entity that takes that data to use it in a way they need to have this consent from the customer. So it's not sharing the data, it's also putting the power to the owner of the data to use it in a better way for his life, her life.
So I would get a step even further from that. So before engaging with the customer, with the business, with the ERP, and how Ralph stated that, we need to educate the customer. So we need to put a clear framework for the customer to understand what he should expect from this interaction, what could he or she expect that will happen with his data. Because yes, as Ralph mentioned it very well, it's the customer's data. It's not ours data, it's not the business's data, it's not the government's data, it's the customer's data. And we need to be very clear in terms of when we're engaging with the customer, we need to educate him first. What will happen? For what he grants that consent? What type of data will be accessible? How much interaction with the data we can do? We need to put guarantees in front of him that we won't sell that data, we won't use it against him, and so on. And that's very important here. So the education of the customer comes before any interactions should happen.
Fully agree.
Yeah, the example that you just gave to me looks like a deadlock, where the real estate agent needs some information, the customer doesn't want to share that information, but needs the apartment, so on. So, in order to break this vicious cycle, I think first of all the customer needs to be educated to understand what access he has to give to his data, but also needs support from a third player. Yeah, that would be able to support the customer in this, the consumer in this process, to access securely his data and put it in a way that it's relevant to the agency, but not disclosing more than the agency really needs for renting the apartment. Yeah, so now I'm going back to what I was just saying earlier. We are talking here about innovation. We are talking here about new players that have to come into play and offer solutions based on the technology offered by us here that are suited to the consumers and suited to the businesses that need such information. And we are working actively with some partners that have such scenarios in mind and work to fill this gap. And I think the innovation will not come from just improving the payments as they exist now, or doing a better PFM that we had 3 years ago that is based on APIs. It's identifying and providing new use cases to the consumer that are relevant and helpful and can change life of the consumer.
Radu, Ralph, do you want to comment on this? Or if not, I can give...
I just wanted to jump in, actually. I completely agree with this. What we need to do is basically to find new ways to break this deadlock, right? So in the scenario that you mentioned, I would completely see it as a service that can be provided by the bank, right? So I don't need to share my transaction data with whatever agency in order that they will analyze it and find out if I'm eligible for that, for renting that apartment or not. I will just need the agency to send his criteria to the bank, and the bank can decide if I'm eligible or not. Just in the same way that when you are unlocking your phone, your fingerprint is not stored somewhere in the memory of the phone, and you are just comparing with what you currently scan, right? but it is sent to the secure enclave where you have this information, the analysis is done there, and you are coming back with just the result. So yes, it is about sharing access to data indeed, but it very much depends on which data needs to be shared. Because otherwise, of course, people are used with credit bureaus, for example, that are able to access your transaction and find out your credit worthiness based on that. It is not something new, but it is something regulated. It is something very clearly defined. It has all this prerogative. So ultimately, it's about coming up with new ways, indeed, to breaking the deadlock, to come with use cases that exist and solutions for fulfilling them. It's not that sharing data or access to that data needs to be scary. It's just about understanding clearly what does it mean and proposing a solution for that is feasible for all the participants.
Yeah, I was just about to say something very similar. You know, it is an opportunity to have other ways of establishing creditworthiness now. So in the past, we had these, in many countries, we had these credit bureaus where the intelligence about my creditworthiness has been gathered behind my back with very little input inside for myself. So this is something that has been done really behind my back, and then I would have to provide a certificate from that credit bureau to my future landlord in order to get to rent an apartment. That was a situation 2 years ago, and for many still is. And now we have an opportunity where I can actually prove myself, if I want to, with the help of an open banking based service that does not have to disclose my whole transaction history or whatever, but I can prove that I have income above whatever, so a certain level, and it's all controlled by myself. And so it's a huge opportunity, and it's a great step forward from what has been in place so far.
Yeah, so part of the problem with you're describing is with the UK Open Banking OBIE consent model, because under granular consent, you give consent to your credit transactions or your debit transactions, so you get all the transactions. And there isn't a way of just saying, well, just this transaction with this purpose code. So a way around that, of course, is for people to offer services to say, I can validate your salary, I can validate with your consent. So I'm not showing that you've been to the bar or you've where you go shopping. I'm showing just the piece of information that they need. And so that then it's that thinking about the customer and what service to offer them with their data. And I think that's the solution to these sort of things. Educating the customers is fine, but it's a complex, open banking is complex. Most customers are not going to spend a long time thinking about this. They just want a simple service to allow them to rent a flat. And the landlord wants to verify their salary. So just give them that. Don't do the rest.
Yes, thank you all so much. And I fully agree with you. I provided this case in order to get your arguments. And I think all the players in this domain, in open banking, if we want to see this succeeding, we have to make it as clear as we can. What is there for the customer, why it's safe, why it's secure, what are the advantages. And when we come towards, cases like which are abusing, let's say, the customer trust, give here your consent for all the transaction, and they have no deadline, and actually I need just this piece of information or this piece of information. We, in this ecosystem, we should highlight that this is not the way to do it. There are other ways of capturing consent. We should be more granular, transparent, and educate the customer. With this, we are at the end of our panel. Thank you so much, each of you. It was extremely interesting. And yeah, if you have questions for any of us, we will be here. Thank you. Thank you, Ralph. Thank you, Radu.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.